All right, as we continue with our Business of Dying feature, now funerals used to be about mourning and grieving for the departed, but it appears that it has taken a dramatic turn with burials becoming an extravagant show. Some funeral providers say their aim has always been to provide services that are dignified while anticipating new trends within the industry. To explore the role of funeral insurance and burial societies in this ever-changing landscape, I'm joined now by Muzi Hlengwa, who's the spokesperson for the funeral industries of South Africa. Hlengwa, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. So maybe let's perhaps start with the multiple products that exist within the market when it comes to providing for a decent funeral. How have they evolved over time?
Good evening to you and the viewers at home. One would like to start by acknowledging the support that we are getting from the communities that we are servicing. And from time to time, we are being directed by the very same communities that we are servicing into what product they would like to have. You know, when death comes, it comes most of the time as a shock. It brings about pain in the families of the late. So ours is to easing the burden that comes with arranging the funeral service so as to put your loved one to rest. Now, we as an industry have about 3 different types of products, if one may put it so. One is the actual service that we render on cash basis. The other one will be the funeral policies themselves. The other one will be when organizations come and source our services so that they can fulfill their promises that they have given to their members. The most typical one will be the burial societies that we have. The difference between the policies and, should I say, insurance policy and burial societies or burial covers that we have is that the actual burial cover provide you with tangible products that does not change or loses value over time, as opposed to when you are purchasing a funeral policy of a certain value that will lose its own value. Say, for example, if you had a 10,000 Rand cover, maybe in the past years, today that 10,000 Rand can hardly buy you just a basic funeral. Otherwise, a person who had bought a service of a casket, the casket is still the same casket today. So this is what we are saying to members of the public. We are encouraging them to buy more of these tangible products because they don't change over time.
And that's a very important point, but it also just goes to the discussion that has been had throughout the day with regards to some of the pressures that especially Black communities feel when it comes to burying their loved ones. And maybe I just want to find out from you with regards to the fact that is it that these pressures exist, or because how we are designed structurally in terms of communities, there are certain expenses that people will incur whether they like it or not? For example, if a funeral is taking place in the township, spatially the yards are quite small. So if you want to accommodate 50 to 100 to 200 people, you would then have to hire a tent. As opposed to someone who lives in an affluent urban area, they will probably have already a space that is sheltered. So acquiring the expense of that tent would not necessarily be an expense for them. But how have we come to a time where now these expenses have become so exorbitant that we're not just looking, like you're saying, at ensuring that you purchase a casket and all the bare necessities, but it's actually the money that we're looking for in order for us to be extravagant with our decent funerals?
Look, it comes with the culture, you know, most of it as an African nation, we have things that we cannot escape, as you have mentioned. You know, traditionally, if a man, a man in the house is late, you will need to have not only a goat and a cattle, you know, but at times, you know, it's how people perceive the service that they feel it's fits for the late. For an example, a person who's more fashionable, a person who uh, lives you know, a glamorous lifestyle while he was alive, definitely sure the family will want to give him or her such an equivalent send off. So it differs. As undertakers, we provide exactly as per the instructions of the family. I always say this, you know, with as little as 3,000 rand, you can still bury your loved one. With as much as 3 million, you can bury your loved one. It's up to you. What do you want to do? If you come to me and say, I want a Rolls Royce convoy, I'll give you a Rolls Royce convoy, and the Rolls Royce will never come cheap. If you want just a hearse and a coffin, I can give that to you as well. We as undertakers will never determine the price, will never chase away people simple because they don't have money. Actually, what we do as undertakers is when we realize that the family is struggling to bury, we do cover those funeral at our expense without the families have to pay a cent, you know, because we understand the communities that we grew up in. We understand the communities that we're coming from. So their pain is our pain.
Speaking on that, Hlengwa, I mean, you mentioned earlier that sometimes you feel that funeral policies are not comprehensively designed, especially for Black communities and in how their funerals are put together. What are some of the administrative things that we don't think about for a funeral, as opposed to when a funeral policy just pays out the money, but it's the grave and everything else that comes with it, that somebody has to do that admin that we often miss when it comes to some of the burial societies or paying to a funeral parlor, which they would then take care of?
Actually, you know, you as a person, you know exactly what sort of a funeral that you will require should a member of the family passes on, or yourself. Um, However, you can never anticipate when and how are you going to die. For an example, a person who dies at the hospital, the admin is more smaller than the person who dies at home. If one dies at the hospital, already the doctors are there to declare the deceased dead, and they are there to state what is the cause of death, rather than a person who's dying at home, who dies maybe in front of the family where there's no one who can declare him deceased, you know, medically. Then the family will have to now start by paying the expenses of the doctors, so that that particular admin starts the way it should start, because you can't register a death and get a death certificate without that initial admin that the doctors do, and that tends to be expensive, mostly in families that do not afford. Some doctors will charge from 1,500 up. It depends on a particular doctor and with the relationship that you have with an undertaker. What is better, and what we as undertakers are providing, as opposed to what the insurance will provide is that we tend to be the ones that start that admin and pay for some expenses at times so that the family is covered from the word go. However, with the insurance policies, you have to cough out that money that you don't have before you can even go and launch a claim. Sometimes when you launch a claim, it comes and they say the claim is not being honored because maybe of missing premiums or whatever the cases are. Sometimes they even delay, to pay, and then you'll have to go out and source out money elsewhere. So, yeah, there's a lot that one needs to think about before buying a funeral policy. As I've said earlier on, my advice is that you must have your own undertaker that you are assured that when you loses your loved one, you are able to contact that particular undertaker to come and remove the body. Because if you don't have an undertaker that you have signed up with, anybody can just call any undertaker, and then when you decide that this is not the perfect or the correct undertaker that I want to conduct my funeral, and you want to take the body away from them, you will then have to pay an arm and a leg in order to remove that body from one particular undertaker to the other.
So what happens in the instance where, let's say as siblings, we all take the precautionary measure of ensuring that we each have an undertaker for a parent, and when that parent passes away, what happens to the other two, for example, if there's three of us that all have different undertakers that we've contributed towards? And I mean, not all three undertakers can then bury that parent. What happens to the premiums or the benefits of the other two siblings?
It's a good thing that you asked this question, because it's a question that has been asked for many times, and we never as an industry got an opportunity to explain what happens. Look, in every insurance, there is something called over insurance. There's a margin whereby one cannot exceed the amount of insurance. For an example, if you take a policy, a funeral policy, most of the time it is kept at 100,000. You cannot be insured more than 100,000 for a funeral policy or a burial policy. So if that happens, it means the first person who launches the claim will be the one that is paid 100,000 or up to 100,000. Even if it's 10 of you who have covered your mother or your father, you won't be able to claim for whatever policy that you were paying for, because at that particular time you have reached your threshold. So it's the same thing with the funeral policies. With the burial covers, you cannot have more than one burial cover that provides a funeral service, because you can't be in one coffin and then you bury and then you come back again and you are buried by the other partner, and then you come back again and you go to the dead partner for that particular service. It doesn't happen that way. So if you have a policy that says I provide the funeral service, whoever picks up that body is the one that will cover the funeral. Others are not going to provide you with anything, unless otherwise they've stated initially that if you don't bury with us, we will pay. But even if they say so, they still will look at the threshold. If you are above the threshold, then you are not going to be paid anything towards your claim.
And isn't there a system that could perhaps circumvent this before the incident takes place? So when we are all registering this particular person, because we all use ID numbers, could there not be a system that when the second and the third person comes in, even before you're making those premiums, that the system would say, no, this person has already been insured, therefore you can't insure for the exact same thing, then perhaps you can then redirect that money towards flowers or catering so that everyone is able to contribute fairly.
Look, it's not as easy like that. There are many other determining factors around this. Even insurance companies, with all the sophisticated systems that they have, they will still have a person who's overinsured. But with us, the answer will be very simple and very easy. You know, if you have a policy that covers your mother, and your sister too has the same policy. We cannot say to your brother, you cannot have a policy, because the two of you may fail to honor the premiums, and then there's no cover at all. So we allow people at the end of the day, all of them, to cover their parents as much as they would like to. But at the end of the day, they must know that only one policy will be honored because of the over-insurance that I've mentioned. It's very difficult to say now, Pindile, because you have covered your mother, then Zama cannot. What if Pindile loses her job and or misses the premiums, and do not pay, and it means now there's no cover at all.
Lastly, before I let you go, what advice would you give to people in order for them to be covered and be safe at a time of death, be it for themselves or for their loved ones? What are the basics that we need to take care of before we add all the frills and the bells to it?
No, the basics of the funeral will be the removal of the body, the storage, the coffin, the hearse, the grave. That's the funeral. Any other thing is an extra. That is the basic funeral. This is what you need to ensure that you have. So I will always say this, when people take funeral policies, it's a long way before you die. You don't want to go and take a funeral policy and pay a premium of 1,000 rand for the rest of your life, because you're not going to die today. You are still going to pay until you die. So you want to take a funeral policy that will give you the minimum requirements of the funeral. Maybe if you want to change, then only then you are able now to say, no, I want to top up, I want to maybe change from a coffin to a casket, or from a casket to a dome casket, or a super dome type of a funeral. This is my advice. Pay what you can afford. Do not look at what your neighbor now is doing and want to emulate your neighbor. You are not your neighbor. You are just you. You must pay what you afford. If you go and drive on the highway, there are many cars. It's not the same car. Someone is driving a Polo, the other one is driving a Mercedes, but they are all cars and they all reach their destinations. So you can't want to have what your neighbors are having. We are in business as the industry. If you want to say to us, I want 10 G-Wagons, I repeat this, we will get them to you at the price. But if you want a simple funeral, we are glad to assist. In fact, as undertakers, we enjoy more servicing people who are happy with what they are paying for. We don't want anyone to be strained and pay what they do not afford. Look, many cases when the communities call on me and say this parlor is refusing to release the body, when you get there, you will find that the family wanted a porch funeral that they do not afford. Even when the undertaker is telling them, change to maybe a lower package, they will say, no, this is my mother, my father went like this, I still want my mother to go like this. The days are not the same. When you have money, spend it. But when you don't have money, do not spend what you don't have.
All right, Bab Hlengwa, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and your advice, much needed advice, especially when it comes to those decent funerals. That was Muzi Hlengwa, the spokesperson for the funeral industries of South Africa.